What is up, guys? It is AJ from MMA Experts, and we were talking about the potential return of Brock Lesnar. Just recently, it was announced that he was a free agent and he's no longer a part of the WWE. Now, there's not a guarantee that he steps back in the octagon, but I think there's definitely some interest on Brock's side and especially the UFC side. If you get Brock back inside of the UFC, this is a massive selling pay-per-view. Any opponent that he has is going to sell massively. Now, imagine he comes back and fights someone in the top 5 of the heavyweight division, or even crazy enough, some type of title shot or near title shot, maybe a number 1 contender type matchup or super fight. But let's get into it. Potentially, the first opponent that comes to mind is the man who called him out, Jon Jones. And Jon Jones obviously is moving up to heavyweight now, relinquished his light heavyweight belt, which he held for years. You could see this matchup being a massive super fight. The pay-per-view sales would be astronomical. I couldn't imagine the numbers they'd pull. And I think the matchup would be very interesting. I don't think that it's going to be an easy fight for Jon Jones by any means. Brock Lesnar is a very big human being, and for a debuting Jon Jones at heavyweight, this is going to be a guy that's probably stronger by far than anyone he's ever fought. Brock Lesnar, former Division I NCAA All-American wrestler. He has a very strong wrestling base. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to take Jon down and hold him down, but Jon Jones is definitely going to be threatened by the wrestling of Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, years ago, he did land a takedown on Cain Velasquez before he was stopped. Granted, he had diverticulitis at the time. You saw in his matchups with guys like Alistair Overeem and Cain Velasquez, he wasn't the Brock that we saw in the early days, who was able to really dish out a lot of punishment on his opponents. You can see there the body shot that ended Brock Lesnar against Alistair Overeem, and that was the Ubereem, the Overeem that I believe if that Alistair Overeem existed, he would have been the heavyweight champion. Obviously, he was not able to maintain that physique without the anabolic enhancements, which he tested positive for around that time. Brock Lesnar has had USADA issues as well. You look at him when he fought Mark Hunt, he was jacked. He looked like prime Brock Lesnar, and he beats Mark Hunt, who at that time was a top heavyweight in the world. And Brock Lesnar came in, hadn't fought in over 5 years, comes in, maybe 6 years. I believe 2010 was his last fight. Comes in 2016 and beats Mark Hunt, who's a top fighter in the UFC's heavyweight division at that time. Granted, he washed out, now's released. And now to come back for a super fight against Jon Jones, to me, makes the most sense. It's the only matchup I think that makes sense. The Daniel Cormier super fight was fun and all, but I think Brock Lesnar wasn't super interested in fighting Cormier. He doesn't have that same name value as Jon Jones. Not saying that Cormier isn't an all-time great, he is, but Jon Jones is going to be a much higher selling point. Let's get into the matchup. A fantasy prediction, a fantasy breakdown. If these two were to step in the octagon against one another, what would happen? I think Brock Lesnar would be competitive maybe in the first round, maybe second round. I think he definitely, looked to get this fight to the mat against Jones, but I think Jon Jones' clinch is going to be too much for Brock. We saw against Alistair Overeem that Brock Lesnar's ability in the clinch is not extremely high level. Granted, Overeem is one of the best from the clinch with his knees. I think Jon Jones is very dangerous with his elbows and knees from the clinch as well. And I think we could see a potential stoppage with Brock Lesnar and Jon Jones. Now, I'm predicting that this is the beast Brock Lesnar that we saw against Mark Coleman. If it's not, I think Jon Jones is a much easier night. I think Jones is bulking up for heavyweight for his debut. What makes more sense? Obviously, Stipe Miocic is the fight Jon Jones wants, but let's say Stipe is going to fight Francis, because Francis deserves that shot. I think Brock Lesnar, Jon Jones is a massive fight. You have Brock Lesnar go in, and let's say Jones works him and dominates him. Now, he beat one of the scariest men on the planet in dominant fashion in his heavyweight debut. I think the win over Brock Lesnar for Jon Jones is a huge name in his hat. I mean, this is a legacy name. Jon Jones beats Brock Lesnar. I'm going to tell you guys straight up. I don't see Brock Lesnar really having a chance in that fight. He's going to obviously look to get the fight to the mat. He may try to strike, but there's levels to this game, and I think Jon Jones is a level above, especially now, all the years past. Jon Jones is still, perfecting and crafting his abilities, and he obviously, yes, his fight against Reyes, he didn't look fantastic. Yes, he didn't look fantastic against Thiago Santos, but he will rise to the occasion, as we've seen in the past with Jon Jones in big fights, and he dominates Brock Lesnar, and he stops him around round number 3. And I think this fight would do crazy numbers. Brock Lesnar comes back one last time. He hasn't won a fight since 2010. Yeah, he beat Mark Hunt, but it was overturned to a no contest, which I did forget to mention, because he tested positive for, I believe, clomiphene, which is used to cover up anabolic steroid usage. And obviously, if you look at Brock Lesnar, he's on anabolic steroids. I mean, it's the WWE. Everybody there is juiced to the gills. The whole allure of pro wrestling is these monstrous men that are supposed to be badasses and tough guys doing crazy shit. MMA, granted, this guy's taking stuff too. We've seen it. We've seen a lot of people pop. We've seen Jon Jones pop. I think this is an awesome fight. I think it's going to sell astronomical numbers. I think when we actually get the fight to happen, it's going to be a lot of clinching, a lot of work from range for Jon Jones. I think he lands a lot of beautiful kicks from the outside to the legs. I think he works some nice elbows inside. I think Brock Lesnar succumbs to Jon Jones by TKO. I don't think he goes 5 rounds. I'm not expecting the stamina with all the muscle mass he has to get past round 3 with Jones. I think we get a late stoppage in round number 3. I think Jon gets him in the clinch, rips him with some body shots. I think the body of Brock Lesnar is vulnerable. I really do. I know diverticulitis, I believe his symptoms now have at least lessened or gone away. But I still think he's going to be sensitive with body shots. I think Jones works the body early, dominates Brock Lesnar, gets a stoppage around round number 3, beats the Goliath in the David Goliath matchup, and sets up the biggest fight of all time, for him at least, versus either Stipe Miocic, the best heavyweight of all time, or Francis Ngannou, the scariest heavyweight of all time. Either way, you have another super fight. Jon Jones is going to make astronomical amounts of money here. So is Brock Lesnar. Now, obviously, the financial benefit for Brock, I don't think he really cares. This guy is very wealthy, makes a ton of money doing fake wrestling, professional wrestling in the WWE. And coming back into the cage, obviously, is not going to be as much money maybe as in the WWE. But it's a chance for him to beat Jon Jones. And I mean, if Brock Lesnar somehow was able to defeat Jon Jones, Brock Lesnar goes down as one of the most badass fighters of all time. I mean, he's still a savage, and I think right now, Brock still beats guys inside of the top 10. Outside of the Jon Jones matchup, there's still fights for Brock, and I'll just quickly bring up the UFC heavyweight rankings, just for fun since we're doing it, and see who I think Brock Lesnar would beat. And I do think there's guys that he would beat inside the back end of the top 10. Stylistic matchups have a lot to do, I feel like, with success, especially for Brock Lesnar. Let me quickly find this here. All right, let's see. I'm actually going to bring up the rankings on the screen. Let's see. Okay, let me move myself out of the way for you guys. We have the heavyweight roster. All right, here we go. All right, so looking through the rankings in the top 10, I'll do top 15 of the unofficial rankings. I mean, obviously, Gustafsson, I think Brock Lesnar would be too much for in terms of the wrestling ability, to be 100% honest with you guys. But let's move up to different matchups. Aleksei Oleinik, Brock Lesnar would be crazy. I don't think Oleinek's jiu-jitsu would work against Brock Lesnar. I think Brock would be too big, and that's a fight he could win. I think Walt Harris is a tricky fight because of the power. But I think there's potential for Brock to beat Walt Harris. I mean, Brock Lesnar is still a high-level fighter, even though he hasn't stepped in the cage in a long time. I mean, he can kick ass, man. He's a high-level guy, and his wrestling is going to be so dominant. I think Volkov, too long, too rangy. He'll get taken down, but we saw against Curtis Blades, Volkov is not an easy guy to fight. Derek Lewis, stylistic matchup is not good for Derek Lewis. He struggles with grapplers. I mean, Junior Dos Santos, I think he's older now, but I still have some faith in his boxing skill. And I think maybe that he would still be able to beat Brock Lesnar. Maybe they run that back. That would be crazy because that fight was supposed to happen years ago. And now moving up, Alistair Overeem, Brock Lesnar. I think Overeem does beat him again. The clinch work. Rosenstruik Lesnar. I think Rosenstruik's power will stop Brock because I think Brock can't TKO him on the ground. I think he'll just get him down, but he's not going to be able to get a TKO over Rosenstruik, and I think Rosenstruik might be able to knock him out. Then when you get into the top 3, obviously, Curtis Blades is an extremely high-level wrestler. I think he would probably knock Brock out with punches. Francis Ngannou, I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe something crazy happens there, but one touch from Ngannou, the fight's finished for Brock. And Stipe Miocic is going to be too much for Brock Lesnar. So, I mean, out in the top 10, he's still a top 15 heavyweight in the world, I feel. This might be crazy. I might sound stupid saying it, but at least from what we saw Brock Lesnar 4 years ago in 2016, he's still top 15. There's still guys that he can beat inside of the UFC's top 15. And I think that the fight with him and Jon Jones would just be an amazing fight to sell. I really do. I think it would be a lot of fun, and I think that there would be a lot of money to be made here. Let me quickly bring myself back into normal size. But the Brock Lesnar return is a possibility. It's no guarantee. It's just a fun little video I wanted to have a discussion about. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think Brock Lesnar should make a return? And if he does make a return, who's the opponent that you would pick? For me, I'm going to say Jon Jones, because Brock Lesnar's not going to accept anything outside of super fights. I don't think that Brock Lesnar is going to take a fight versus a guy in the back end of the top 15, especially now when this would most likely be his last fight, unless he won and then got a title shot. So let me know, guys. Let's see what you guys think. I appreciate everybody watching this video. See you guys all in the next one. Make sure you follow my social media, Instagram, Twitter. Like, subscribe. Peace out, guys. Be good.